Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. I am Sharon Green Middleton, Vice President of the City Council, representative for the 6th Council District, and Chairperson for the Economic and Community Development Committee. This afternoon, we will hear the following bills, and there are 6 of them. Bill number 23-0436, Urban Renewal, Brooklyn Curtis Bay Renewal, Area Designation, and Urban Renewal Plan. Bill number 23-0409, Zoning Conditional Use Conversion of a Single-Family Dwelling Unit to 3 dwelling units in the R8 Zoning District, variances 2127 McCullough Street. Bill number 23-0320, Residential Permit Parking Program Area, Brunt Street Area. 23-0407, Zoning Discontinuation or abandonment of non-conforming use reporting. 23-0140R, an informational hearing on permit reforms. And 23-0410, rezoning 6311 Eastern Avenue. Members of the committee that are here today, we have John Bullock of the 9th District, Mark Conway of the 4th District, Odette Ramos of the 14th District, and Robert Stokes of the 12th District. And we also have Councilwoman Felicia Porter of the 10th District with her for the first bill. We also have representatives of the President's Office, Tiffany Macklin and Dwayne Adams, and also representative from the Office of the Mayor, Dominic McNally, for Governmental Relations. So let's begin. Bill number 23-0436, Urban Renewal, Brooklyn Curtis Bay Renewal Area Designation and Urban Renewal Plan, for the purpose of repealing the existing Brooklyn Curtis Bay Urban Renewal Plan and replacing it by designating as a renewal area an area situated in Baltimore City, Maryland, known as Brooklyn Curtis Bay, generally including both sides of Patapsco Avenue between the Harbor Tunnel Thruway and Pennington Avenue, both sides of Pennington Avenue between Patapsco Avenue and Cedix Street, the west side of Curtis Avenue between Cedix Street and Patapsco Avenue, both sides South Hanover Street between Jack Street and Chesapeake Avenue, and the south side of Potee Street between Patapsco Avenue and Frankfurt Avenue, establishing the objectives of the Urban Renewal Plan, establishing permitted land uses in the renewal area, providing that where there might be conflict between the provisions of the Urban Renewal Plan and the provisions of any planned unit development, the provisions of the Planned Unit Development Control, providing review requirements and controls for all plans for new construction. This bill was introduced on October 2nd, 2023. The bill was sponsored by Councilwoman Porter, and at this time we'll have comments from Councilwoman Porter.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I thank you all for considering this urban renewal plan today. This is an opportunity to really right some of the social ills that are occurring within the Brooklyn and Curtis Bay community. This particular URP plan has had significant community input, and it will allow the true community revitalization of Brooklyn and Curtis Bay to be community-centered and community-focused. Thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And we also have joined us another member of the committee, Ryan Dorsey of the 3rd District. The committee will now hear from agency representatives. We'll start with the City Solicitor's Office.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Michelle Toth on behalf of the City Solicitor. And we approve the bill for form and legal sufficiency, provided certain amendments are made, and they have been drafted and presented, is my understanding.
Okay, and we do have copies. Thank you. Department of Housing and Community Development.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Stephanie Murdoch, Director of Legislative Services for DHCD. We stand by our bill report. We do not object to the passage of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Baltimore Development Corporation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Alex Walenskas, BDC. We stand by our favorable report.
Thank you. Department of Public Works.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Marcia Collins, representing the Department of Public Works. We have no objection to the passage of this bill.
Department of Transportation.
Madam Chair, Liam Davis, Baltimore City Department of Transportation. We stand by our bill report. No objection. Thank you.
Planning Department, Commission.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and the members of the committee for having me, and thanks, Councilwoman Porter, for introducing the bill. I can go right ahead and talk about the background and the
And
amendment.
identify yourself.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
And I'm Jasmine Kimball. I'm the Southern District Planner with Department of Planning. Thank you. On November 2nd of this year, the Planning Commission considered Council Bill number 230436 and approved with staff amendments. The amendments before you address the suggested amendments from Department of Planning, Planning Commission, and Law. I wanted to provide a little background of the Brooklyn Curtis Bay Renewal Area Designation and Urban Renewal Plan. The purpose of the repeal and replacement of this urban renewal plan is to update the existing language to match the modernized Baltimore City zoning code, remove antiquated language that no longer reflects actual neighborhood conditions, and to clarify land use provisions and design guidelines. The primary goal of this urban renewal plan is to provide requirements and standards designed to ensure that any new uses and development proposed in Brooklyn Curtis Bay enhance the viability, stability, attractiveness, and convenience for residents and businesses in Brooklyn Curtis Bay and the city as a whole. I will go through the amendments one by one, if that is preferred.
Please.
So there are 14 amendments in total. Amendment number 1, on page 5, strike beginning with geographic in line 18, down through and including URP, in line 20, and substitute the URP area. It currently describes the boundary of the Brooklyn Curtis Bay neighborhoods being described in Section A1 of the Urban Renewal Plan. Section A1 describes the boundary of the Urban Renewal Plan and not the boundary of the neighborhood, so that line is being removed. Also, in amendment number 1, on that same page, replace Curtis Bay Community Association with Community of Curtis Bay Association. Remove L, landmark structures. It is not applicable to this plan, and adjust the lettering accordingly. Now moving on to amendment number 2. This amendment includes technical edits to the plan goals to better align with the vision of the Brooklyn Curtis Bay communities. Points that were added include establishing minimum comprehensive design and rehabilitation standards that will encourage pedestrian, safe, and attractive streets, and commercial development in balance with adjacent commercial, industrial, and residential uses. Working with residents, business owners, property owners, and institutions to bring about a general physical improvement of Brooklyn and Curtis Bay by coordinating private rehabilitation, redevelopment, and public improvements, and providing an environment for the staging of year-round promotional activities and events. Moving on to amendment number 3. This includes the prohibited uses for land use provisions. For the first one, we removed animal clinic use because it was a mistake when legislative reference was added in the document. Daycare for children are allowed. Before, it prohibited daycare centers for adult and children, but we only want to prohibit adults. We removed medical dental office and kept healthcare clinic since it is the same thing. We prohibited all motor vehicle service and repair for fully enclosed structures and outdoor vehicle storages in all zoning designations of the urban renewal plan. We prohibit rooming houses, taverns, truck repair, and video lottery facilities in all zoning designations. And the last one for this amendment, Law Department reviewed the restrictions of the residential care facilities that was on this table. For the reason of the Fair Housing Act, paragraph B of the Brooklyn Curtis Bay Urban Renewal Plan entitled Land Use Provisions must comply with the FHA and the ADA and the court's requirement that the city permit small group homes in residential areas. Thus, to approve the bill for form and legal sufficiency, the prohibition on residential care facilities in Table 1, page 8 must be removed. For amendment number 4, change Appendix B to Appendix A, since Appendix B is a guideline for artistic expression. On page 10, strike lines 1 through 5, which reads, "These guidelines do not apply to any structure located within an industrial zoned area designated as such by the zoning code of Baltimore City." Moving forward to amendment number 5. On page 12, page 12, remove Charles North Community Association and replace with community organization. For amendment number 6, on page 13, in lines 3, 5, and 12, after organization, insert or any successor organization. Amendment number 7, this removes the current Appendix A, a guideline for artistic expression, and on the following pages, replace Appendix B with Appendix A. For amendment number 8, change language under general principles and guidelines that was recommended and that was used in recommended terms, change it to requirement. So for example, on page 15 in lines 8 and 10, strike the word should and substitute for must. Amendment number 9, remove sentence reference about the National Park Service brief. It is not applicable to this plan. Also part of amendment number 9, change some language under rehabilitation guideline that was recommended to language that is more of a requirement. Amendment number 10, change language so that windows, doors, and stained glass transoms installed pre-1930 must be retained. Amendment number 11, change language under roof and fenestration sections that was recommended to more of a requirement. Amendment number 12, technical edits were made to these sections. And a part of that amendment, this paragraph was replaced with the current paragraph and now includes, within 3 weeks after receipt, any community organization may advise. There were also edits made in this sentence. The Commissioner of the Department of Housing and Community Development retains final authority. Amendment number 13, remove the contributing structures map and the land disposition map on pages 25 and 26. And on page 27, replace Exhibit 5 with Exhibit 3. One more for amendment number 13. In the table of contents on page 28, remove Appendix A, guidelines for artistic expression, Exhibit 3, contributing structures map, and Exhibit 4, land disposition, and replace the label Exhibit 5 with Exhibit 3. And the last amendment, amendment number 14, remove Exhibit 3, acquisition, and Exhibit 4, land disposition, from line 4 through 6. Replace Exhibit 5 with Exhibit 3 on line 6, and on line 7, remove appendices A and B and replace with Appendix A. And that lists all of the amendments.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee on the amendments or any part of the bill at this point? Hearing none, I do want to make it a matter of record that we do have on file the required publication. It was published twice in the Daily Record on 11/13 and 11/20 of 2023. And also we have on record approval of some Brooklyn and Curtis Bay individuals and organizations, the Action Baybrook, Inc., and Jan Evelyn, and also the Concerned Citizens for a Better Brooklyn. And that includes Andrea Mayer and Lisa Bowling. And we're now going to hear from CHAP.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Dominic McLilly on behalf of the Mayor's Office of Government Relations. CHAP stands by their report.
Thank you. And do committee members have any comments or questions? We'll now move to public testimony. The committee will now take public testimony. If you are online and would like to testify on this bill, please remember to use your raised hands, but we're going to start with in-person testimony, and we have Jan Evelyn here. Yes, come up and state your name and who you represent, and you can give your in-person testimony. Press that button on the right.
Whoa.
There you go.
Hi, I'm Jan Eveland. I am the CEO of Action Baybrook. I am a Brooklyn resident and a Brooklyn business owner, and I'm authorized this morning to speak for Action Baybrook, myself, for Concerned Citizens for a Better Brooklyn, Andrea Mayer, Lisa Bowling, and Rodette Jones, who is a resident of Curtis Bay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for taking the time to come out. And then we have on, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm moving along, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I only have two things to say, so that's
Okay.
good. Thanks to Jasmine's lengthy statement there. One thing is Table 1 is missing the zoning categories IMU1 and I2, which those zoning categories are in the urban renewal boundaries, and so we would like the same restrictions to apply to those areas that are in the urban renewal area. The second thing is we want to make sure that no amendments hold up the urban renewal plan. An imperfect urban renewal plan is better than no plan. It is crucial that we get this passed because it has been extremely helpful to our community, and we want to keep using this tool to improve it. Thank you.
Thank you. Question to planning. So there was a change that she had mentioned.
Yeah.
Is that something that has to be
So let's,
added in the amendment?
yeah, we would have to do it on second reading because apparently
Okay.
it has to go, it's already been discussed in the bill report. And so that second amendment would have to go in on the second reading. So I can introduce it on the
So,
second reading.
As a matter of record,
Yep.
we'll be expecting that change in
Yes.
second reader. to
And
the
it was
committee.
for I-1 and IMU-1, right?
Yeah, IMU1 and I2.
Okay. And that's correct, that, yeah, I-1 and IMU-1 is added, but we can add I-2.
Okay. So we'll
Yes.
be expecting that in second reading.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, I just have a question.
Yes. Law Department.
I noticed, and maybe I'm wrong, but it looks like there is also R3 and R5.
So there are a few actual zoning zoning codes within this particular footprint. And so I believe that the community wanted those two that were specifically named. And so the other ones are not going to be named in this
Okay.
particular amendment. It's going to be those two, IMU1 and then I2 that are mentioned in the amendment.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee or agencies? And now we have Andrea. Is she? Hi. I'm okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay, now the committee, we're going to take public testimony online. And please use the raise hands button. Do we have any raised hands? And there are no raised hands. We're now going to unmute any callers, and there are none. Do committee members have any further questions or comments? Is there a motion to recommend the amendments. Oh, hold on, somebody just popped in. And Meredith, can you hear us?
Hi. Yes, good afternoon. This is Meredith Chaikin with the Greater Baybrook Alliance. We just wanted to share that we are a community development corporation in Brooklyn and Curtis Bay. We submitted testimony to support this bill and that we fully support.
Thank you. And could you repeat that alliance again?
Sure, it's the Greater Baybrook Alliance. We're a community development corporation in Brooklyn and Curtis Bay.
Thank
And
you so,
Brooklyn Park and
thank you
Brooklyn.
so much.
Thank you.
Checking for any others. All right, is there a motion to recommend the amendments favorable?
So moved. Second.
Who was so moved? By Conway, second by Ramos. Chair Middleton, yes. Bullock is a yes. Conway is a yes. Dorsey is a yes. Glover absent. Ramos is a yes. Stokes is a yes. This bill will move to, these amendments will move to second reader. Is there a motion to recommend the bill favorable as amended? So moved by Conway, second by Ramos. Chair Middleton is a yes. Bullock is a yes. Conway is a yes. Dorsey is a yes. Glover absent. Ramos is a yes. And Stokes is a yes. This bill will move to second reader as amendment, and we'll be also waiting for another amendment change in second reader. Thank you so much. The next committee, the committee will hear Bill number 23-0409. Again, is zoning conditional use conversion of a single-family dwelling unit to 3 dwelling units in the R8 zoning district. Variances 2127 McCullough Street for the purpose of permitting, subject to certain conditions, the conversion of a single-family dwelling unit to 3 dwelling units in the R8 zoning district on the property known as 2127 McCullough Street, Block 0310, Lot 013, as outlined in red on the accompanying plat, and granting variances from certain bulk regulations, lot area size, and providing for a special effective date. This bill was introduced on June 26, 2023. This bill was sponsored by Councilmember Torrance, which is not present with us. And I think I do see him. Councilman Torrance, did you want to comment on Bill, the 2127 McCullough Street is coming up to make a comment. Greetings.
Greetings, Madam Chair.
Right on time.
Sorry, guys. Greetings, Madam Chair. This bill, similar to all bills that come out of the 7th District, have community support and have had conversations with each member of the community adjacent to the property, in addition to that with the neighboring community association. With that, I stand in support. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll now hear from the city solicitor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We approve the bill for form and legal sufficiency, assuming the amendments recommended by planning are made.
Thank you. BMZA?
Dominic McLilly, Mayor's Office of Government Relations. The BMZA stands by their report for this bill.
Thank you. And now the Planning Department.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Martin French for the Baltimore City Planning Department. At its regular meeting on August 31st of this year, the Planning Commission considered City Council Bill 23-0409. The Planning Commission adopted a staff report, which I believe you have copies of in front of you. It made these findings: that the purpose of the bill and proposed use would not be detrimental to or endanger public health, safety, or welfare, would not be precluded by any other law, including an applicable urban renewal plan, would not be contrary to the public interest, would be in harmony with the purpose and intent of the zoning code, and meets all criteria for approval specified in subsection 5-406B of the zoning code of Baltimore City. And further resolved that the Planning Commission concurs with the recommendation of departmental staff and finds that because of its particular surroundings and shape of the specific structure, a practical difficulty would result if the strict letter of the applicable zoning code requirements were carried out, and therefore recommends that City Council Bill 23-0409 be approved by the council with these amendments. The amendments are this: on page 1, line 8 of the bill, strike size, close parenthesis, and substitute size, close parenthesis, off-street parking requirements and gross floor area per unit type. On that same page in line 12, strike the word and on that same page in that same line, after 9-703D, insert and, parenthesis F, close parenthesis, 16-203 and 16-602, parenthesis, table 16-0406, close parenthesis. On that same page in line 25, strike 2250, which is the lot area reference, and substitute 1875. And on that same page in line 26, strike 22.8% and substitute 7.4%. And on page 2, before line 1, insert a new section 3 to state, be it further ordained that pursuant to the authority granted by subsections 5-305A and 5-308 of Article 32, zoning, permission is granted for a variance from the requirements of subsections 9-703F, 16-203, and 16-602, parenthesis, table 16-406, required off-street parking, close parenthesis, for off-street parking, and a new section 4, be it further ordained that pursuant to the authority granted by subsections 5-305A and 5-308 of Article 32, zoning, permission is granted for a variance from the requirements of subsection 9-703C for gross floor area per unit type, as 1,000 square feet are required for each two-bedroom unit, and each of the proposed two-bedroom units will be less than 1,000 square feet of floor area. And therefore, on that same page, in lines 1 through 9, respectively, strike 3 and 4 and substitute 5 and 6 as renumbering. And that concludes our report. Thank you.
Thank you. And just for the committee, you should have these in your packet. They were received today. Any questions from the committee on amendments? Okay, the Housing and Community Development.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Stephanie Murdoch with Baltimore City DHCD. We stand by our favorable bill report.
Thank you. Fire Department.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Dominic McLilly, on behalf of the Mayor's Office of Government Relations. Fire Department apologizes for the inconvenience, but they'll make sure that they have the report printed out to you prior to the bill proceeding to the next council meeting, and they have no objection to the bill.
Thank you. Making note, we'll get that report at the next council meeting. Parking Authority.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Arco Central Parking Authority, and we stand by our bill report, which is not opposed.
Thank you. And Transportation.
Madam Chair, Liam Davis, Baltimore City Department of Transportation. We stand by our bill report, which is no objection. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee on the amendments or the bill? Yes. And they were approved. Okay, checking for public testimony. And while Tony is getting that list to check, anyone that's online, please use the raise hand function so we can recognize you for testimony. And we have no in-person testimony. And checking for online attendees or callers. I don't see any, but verifying a second time. And there are none. Is there a motion to recommend the amendments favorable? So moved by Ramos, second by Conway. Chair Middleton, yes. Bullock? Yes. Conway? Yes. Dorsey? Is a yes. Glover absent. Ramos? Is a yes. And Stokes? Is a yes. And that was for the amendments. Is there a motion to recommend the bill favorable as amended? So moved by Ramos, second Conway. Chair Middleton, yes. Bullock, yes. Conway is a yes. Dorsey is a yes. Glover absent. Ramos is a yes. And Stokes is a yes. This bill will move to second reader. The next, the committee will hear Bill number 23-0420, Residential Permit Parking Program Area, Brunt Street area, for the purpose of establishing a new sanctuary residential permit parking area for the Brunt Street area. This bill was introduced on August 21st, 2023, and the bill was also sponsored by Councilmember Torrance. Councilmember Torrance, comments, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a part of an experiment that we're having in Brunt Street. We've had a number of issues with crime, and this is an opportunity for us to do environmental design and use city processes to provide BPD and others with reasonable articulable suspicion to stop persons who are committing crimes in neighborhoods, and this provides a sanctuary for persons who park on the street. As members of the council do know that in the next council meeting, I do plan to introduce legislation where we will have a task force that will do crime prevention through environmental design. I'm actually just spearheading by doing minor bills that allow us to do it right away, but I think broadly we need to come together, figure out how we can do this comprehensively. So this is just a small tidbit of that right now. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for your comments. City Solicitor's Office.
We approve for form and legal sufficiency.
Thank you. And the Planning Department.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Eric Tiso for Planning. We have no objection. Defer to Parking Authority.
Thank you. Baltimore Police Department.
Erin Murphy, Director of Government Affairs for the Baltimore City Police Department. We stand by our bill report and have no objection.
Thank you. Transportation.
Madam Chair, Liam Davis, Baltimore City Department of Transportation. We stand by our bill report, which is no objection.
And thank you. Parking Authority.
Good day. Nicole Caesar from the Parking Authority. We stand by a report which is favorable with amendments.
Thank you. And the Housing and Community Development Department.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, Stephanie Murdoch, Director of Legislative Services for DHCD. We respectfully stand by our bill report and defer to the Parking Authority.
Thank you. Were there amendments to this bill as well? Could we have someone go over those amendments? Planning. Do you have the amendments? The Parking Authority. Could you, how many amendments do we have?
One amendment.
Could you just kind of go over what that amendment is?
On page 2, strike beginning with...
And kind of speak, yes, thank you.
On page 2, strike beginning with street in line 21 down through and including only in the line 22 and substitute street. And on page 3 in line 10, after properties, insert on the outside of the 2100 block.
Okay, so these are all technical amendments. Any questions about the amendments? The committee will now take public testimony. And there's no one that has signed up online while he is getting to check to see if there's anyone in person that's testifying on this bill.
Madam Chair, I'm good with it. The amendments are technical. They extend the permits to both sides of the street, not just one side.
Okay. Thank you for that added information. Waiting to see if there's any public, and there is no in-person public testimony. Is there a motion to recommend the amendments favorable?
Madam Chair, I just have a quick question.
Yes,
I don't
Councilwoman Ramos.
I don't see the amendments, and they're not on the Parking Authority's report. Are we just understanding what they are and?
Do you have written? They're in the back. You don't have them in the back of your packet?
Not the online one. Oh, they just came. That's why. Okay, never mind. I'm good.
Okay.
Move the amendment.
Amendments moved by Ramos, second by Conway. Chair Middleton, yes. Bullock? Yes. Conway? Yes. Dorsey? Yes. Glover absent. Ramos?
Yes.
And Stokes? Yes. Is there a motion to recommend the bill favorable as amended?
Move favorable.
Second. Ramos, moved by Ramos, second by Conway. Middleton, yes. Bullock? Yes. Is a yes. Conway? Yes. Is a yes. Dorsey? Yes. Is a yes. Glover absent. Ramos? Yes. Is a yes. And Stokes? Yes. Is a yes. This bill will move to second reader. Next, the committee will hear Bill number 23-0407, another zoning, but this is a discontinuation or abandonment of non-conforming use reporting for the purpose of establishing a process for a person to report to the zoning administrator that a non-conforming use or any part of that use has been discontinued for 12 consecutive months or actually abandoned. This bill was introduced on June 26, 2023. The bill was sponsored by Councilwoman Ramos. Councilwoman Ramos, comments, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, committee members. This bill we worked on with DHCD. In my district, we have several non-conforming uses and have had a couple of examples of where the building that the use has been abandoned in did not have a vacant building notice. The zoning administrator has been using vacant building notice to mark the end of a use in a building, which, as we know, isn't accurate, considering that not every building where they're not using the building means that it's dilapidated enough to have a vacant building notice. So in my district, we had a couple of times where the use had ended, in this case, corner stores in one particular part of my district are non-conforming, and there was not a standard way other in the zoning code to tell whether or not that use has been discontinued or abandoned for the 12 months. So what this bill does, it still gives discretion to the zoning administrator, but it also adds information that can be collected by the community and submitted so that the zoning administrator is using that information. The amendments submitted by DHCD, which I consider friendly amendments, also have a form just to help with the complaint process when a community member believes that there's been a discontinuance. This does not put the burden on establishing discontinuance on the residences. It is just another way to provide information for discontinued uses. The law department amendments are also, I consider, friendly amendments that, they're basically technical in nature. The Planning Commission amendments we are not accepting, and that's because after a long conversation, I think we've understood that they're not needed. I'm happy to take any questions. If you look at the bill, page 2, it's a very short bill. It just talks about some of the type of information that can be gathered so that the zoning administrator can determine that there is a non-continuance of the use. And so thank you, Madam Chair, and I ask for a favorable report from my colleagues.
Thank you, and I just want to make it a matter of record in our committee files, we do have where this was published in the Baltimore Sun, November 13th or 14th. And also, we have a written testimony from Councilwoman Ramos of the 14th District. And now we'll go ahead and hear committee reports, and we'll start with the city solicitor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Michelle Toth on behalf of the city solicitor. We approve the bill for form and legal sufficiency with the suggested amendments.
Thank you. BMZA.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Dominic McLilly. On behalf of the Mayor's Office of Government Relations, the BMZA stands by their report.
Thank you, Dominic. And the Planning Commission.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Eric Tiso here for the Planning Commission. The Commission heard this in their meeting of September 21st and recommended the bill be amended and approved. Their amendment was by way of attempting to be helpful. In discussion afterwards, I think we agree that it's not necessary. We defer to either the zoning administrator specifically or housing generally, since it's their operational concern, but I think they have it.
Thank you. And Housing and Community Development, and we
Thank you, Madam Chair.
have the presence of our Housing Commissioner, Alice Kennedy. Thank you for coming. And also the Chief of Staff of Housing, and we got a team here. Thank you, and go ahead, Stephanie.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. We do have the whole team here, and they'll be with us for the next hearing on the permits bill. My name is Stephanie Murdoch. I'm the Director of Legislative Services for Baltimore City DHCD, and I'm also joined to my right, or my left, by Deputy Commissioner Jason Hessler. As the council member mentioned, we did work closely together on this bill, and it would support the work that we already undertake. As the council member mentioned, discontinuance can be noted either through the issuing of a vacant building notice or by conducting monthly inspections of the subject property over the course of a year when the time a complaint is received, and documenting that this use is not in fact taking place. So what this bill would do is allow other factors like photos and affidavits from residents and additional research to be used to designate a discontinued use. We do have two friendly amendments that should be included in your packet, and I'm happy to walk through them for you. These are both friendly technical amendments. On page 2, in line 2, we are striking shall include and substituting must be in the form the Commissioner of the Department of Housing and Community Development requires and contain the following information. And then the second amendment is on page 2 in line 8. We're striking the word and on that same page in line 10, and striking the period and substituting and any supporting documents and photographs that evidence the discontinued or abandoned use. So we're happy to work together with the councilwoman on this ordinance, and we do support the amendment and passage of this bill. Myself and our team do stand by to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, and thank you for those details. Any questions to housing from the committee at this point? And we have Councilman Dorsey from the 3rd District. That's the title of the bill.
I can take a shot at that.
Eric and
Sure,
planning.
and I don't have the copy of the code in front of me, whether they're formally defined or not, but traditionally, the difference would be if you discontinue something, let's say you have a commercial use that's in a residential zone, for example. You stop the business, you walk away, you leave everything there. That would just be a discontinuance. An abandonment would be if you take everything out of the building and it's no longer has any of those non-conforming features in it. That's my understanding how traditionally those have been differentiated. So discontinuance normally requires a period of time of it's there, it's set up, but it's not being used. Whereas if you had, let's say, an overly dense home, but it was completely gutted, there's nothing left of evidence that could be more immediate.
Thank you for that. Jason, I see you shaking your head with housing, and you agree. Any further comments, Councilman?
Yeah, one other. This bill singularly focuses on non-conforming use. Sorry, thank you, Councilman. This bill focuses on non-conforming use.
Yes.
Do we have a similar standard, or why would we not have a similar standard for lapsed or lapsing conditional use as well? I've seen the same concerns, the same issues. I was deposed for 6.5 hours last year or earlier this year in a case that hinged on the lapsing of a conditional use, not a non-conforming use, and that where the zoning administrator had issued a letter of zoning verification for a property that had in that case there been a process of establishing in advance that the use had lapsed, again as a conditional use, then perhaps we wouldn't have been sued.
So what's the question?
Do we have the same, do we have the same kind of process for conditional use, or why should we not?
Give me a moment to look, and I'll be back to you shortly.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Ramos.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I, just as all of us do in our districts, was trying to solve a specific problem, so I did not take up conditional use, but wouldn't be opposed to it.
Okay, due to the power of text searching and a digital code. So in the zoning code, Title 5, Sub 408, discontinued conditional use. If any conditional use is discontinued for a continuous period of 2 years or more, the conditional use approval automatically lapses and is void. So I was pretty sure it was in there, but I wanted to be able to read it to you. So there's a 2-year period on that.
I'm aware of that 2-year period. I think the issue at hand is how do we establish when that commenced, that 2-year period commenced, right?
The concern would be parallel in the same way, and I think the same way with non-conforming uses, there's nothing stopping anybody from documenting it and submitting that by way of a complaint. Whether the committee wishes to incorporate that today, I'll leave that up to you, but the concerns are parallel.
Thanks. I guess then my question with the sponsor's indication of consent here is, I guess my next question is, how difficult would it be to amend this bill to incorporate conditional in as a part of this same process of notification and establishment, the same as non-conforming?
As I look to my right for validation.
Jason Hessler, would you like to comment? Or
Jason Hessler, Department of Housing and Community Development. It actually may yield to law in the question of how this bill was posted and advertised, and if trying to expand it to include non-conforming uses would comply, since it was, I'm sorry, conditional uses when it was listed just as non-conforming uses.
so would another advertisement have to happen because this is being amended?
My impression would be yes, because this would be a substantial change to the bill, and it is a change to the zoning code.
So I would propose that we take a look at that, and if we do not have to refile, I'll be happy to put in a second reader amendment. If we do have to refile, then we'll have to file a new bill. Does that sound good?
Yeah, I'd hate to, I'd love to avoid having to put in a bill that's basically identical to this one that has like literally like 2 words difference. If we can amend this one, and I know that I've asked this question in the past about the required notifications on zoning bills and have received the opinion from the law department that it's quite permissive in what we're allowed to expand and change within the scope of a zoning bill. I would assume that we're at liberty to make these kind of changes here, but it would be nice to have that confirmed from the law department and perhaps ask somebody to draft the whatever changes might be necessary. When asking how difficult it would be to amend this bill, I am cognizant of the fact that the zoning code is expansive in the way that it is constructed, and that non-conforming and conditional use fall under whole different sections of the code. So it's, and not having a total sense of exactly how this bill fits into the total construct of the zoning code. You know, I don't know whether it's a matter of adding a couple of words or whether it's having to reconstruct this entire structure of this bill, but with like, you know, this section and this instead of that section. So I would like to know how easily and if we can do this. Thank you.
Madam Chair, would you prefer that we hold this in order to explore that, or go ahead and you're seeing?
So I'm
not
I
opposed
guess,
to that.
kind of suggesting is there a possibility we could vote on this with the 2 amendments, but if there needs to be an advertisement for this other piece, can we?
Madam Chair, I'm also seeing from my colleague that you want to take some time.
So,
Yes, Councilman Conway.
yeah, Madam Chair, I think a great question by the councilman. I think it's certainly worth looking into. I don't think it would be a substantial change, but it may be a pretty significant formatting change when you start to incorporate the conditional uses. So I'm not sure that voting on it today would be the wisest course of action. We don't want to have to rewrite another bill to do the same thing. So it may be wise for us to just kind of hold off and maybe vote in the future. That's where I'm leaning, but of course I defer to you, Madam Chair.
Any other comments from other committee members?
Madam Chair, thank you. I mean, if the sponsor agrees, you know, the next city council meeting is on Monday. We don't have much time to work all of this out.
Correct.
That's why I suggested we holding it.
If we hold this, you know, we hold it for a couple of weeks and get this all worked out, and then we get it in the next, you know, before the end of the year or something into second reader, that would, I think, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'm fine with that, Madam Chair.
Okay.
So it sounds like we're going to look into whether or not to add, or how to add, I should say, the conditional use piece with these conditions, and then we'll get back to the committee and to Madam Chair to schedule the hearing to either vote this as is or have come in with the changes.
So be it.
Okay. And I appreciate my colleagues indulging on and engaging in this. This is great. Thank you.
So we're going to hold the vote on this bill, but I want to check to see if
No, he's not there. Okay, that's fine.
right now there is no one online for testimony, so he's checking to see if we have any in-person signups. and we have no in-person signups. So just a review on this bill, we do have a recommended amendment from Housing, and we also have was that the only one? The Law Department. And we have a recommended one from the Law Department, and we're waiting for some other information to move forward, so we're going to hold this bill, or put this bill in recess. Moving on to the next bill, the committee will now hear Bill number 22-0140R, an informational hearing permit reforms for the purpose of inviting representatives from the Department of Housing and Community Development, the Office of the City Administrator, the Baltimore City Fire Department, Office of the Fire Marshal, and other relevant parties to provide information on reforms to the Department of Housing and Community Development's permit process. And this bill was introduced on October 3rd, 2023, and the bill sponsor is also Councilwoman Ramos. So before we get to that bill, we're going to, first I'm going to check to make sure we can do that. We want to go and do this next rezoning bill out of the way, and then that way we can go right through with the next bill. Okay. All right, our time is right. So I'm going to get this rezoning bill, and then we'll go back to the other bill, because this will it's a short approval. And that is Bill number 23-0410, rezoning of 6311 Eastern Avenue for the purpose of changing the zoning for the property known as 6311 Eastern Avenue, Block 6699, Lot 002A, as outlined in red on the accompanying plat, from the I-2 zoning district to the C-2 zoning district. This bill was introduced on July 17, 2023. The bill was sponsored by Councilmember Cohen. And comments, Councilmember Cohen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the committee. This is a relatively minor change. This is a former Royal Farms that is no longer there, and that unfortunately has now attracted some issues around crime and grime and just lack of cleanliness. And so the community is very eager to see something else there. In order to further that purpose, we are requesting this rezoning and hope to have the committee's support. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Agency representative report, City Solicitor's Office.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Jeff Hochstetler with the Solicitor's Office. We stand by the report and can approve for forming legal sufficiency.
Thank you. Planning Department.
Good afternoon again. This bill was reviewed by the Planning Commission in their meeting of August 31st. In short, under the old zoning code, this was an industrially zoned area. I believe it was M23, though there was B zoning across the street. So this existing building was built somewhere in the very earliest of 2000s, if not the very latest of the 90s. And interestingly, it would be a non-conforming use, as it is if it were to retain its industrial I-2 zoning. So in looking at that, we believe that it meets the criteria to find a mistake in its change, to keep it as industrial, and we recommend favorable for the conditional, for the commercial use.
Thank you. BMZA.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Dominic McLilly, Mayor's Office of Government Relations. BMZA stands by their report.
Thank you. Housing.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Stephanie Murdoch for Baltimore City DHCD. We stand by our bill report. We do not object to the passage of this bill.
Thank you. Baltimore Development Corporation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Alex Winskis with Baltimore Development Corporation. We stand by our favorable report.
Thank you. Transportation.
Madam Chair, Liam Davis, Baltimore City Department of Transportation. We stand by our bill report, which is no objection. Thank you.
And the Parking Authority.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Arco Sem from the Parking Authority, and we stand by our bill report, which is not opposed.
Thank you. So all reports are favorable. Do committee members have any comments or questions? Hearing none. Checking for public testimony. And we don't see anything online, but we do have Caroline Hecker for in-person testimony.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Caroline Hecker, Rosenberg, Martin, Greenberg, on behalf of the applicant. I'm joined by Thomas Rosen of Two Farms, Inc., the property owner. And thank you. I appreciate you taking us out of order to get through this hearing. And thank you, Councilmember Cohen, for introducing the bill. Just very briefly, I wanted to add this to the committee's file. This is the memo that we had submitted to the Planning Commission.
Thank you.
Detailing the findings of that in support of the mistake that we believe was made in the rezoning of the property to the I-2 district in Transform Baltimore. We believe that this mistake can be corrected by rezoning the property to C2 now, which is much more appropriate given the condition of the surrounding community along the Eastern Avenue commercial corridor. Happy to answer any questions that you might have, but we're here in support.
Thank you. Any questions for Caroline? And seeing none? Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you very much.
And this bill has no amendments. Is there a motion to recommend the bill favorable? Second. So moved by Dorsey, second by Ramos. Chair Middleton, yes. Bullock? Yes. Yes. Conway? Yes. Yes. Dorsey? Yes. Glover absent. Ramos? Yes. Yes. And Stokes? Yes. This bill will move to second reader at the next council meeting.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and thank you, Councilman Dorsey, for flagging that move so people that do not have to be a part of this next bill can move on. So now we are going back to Bill number 22-0140R, informational hearing, permit reforms. Again, for the purpose of inviting representatives from the Department of Housing and Community Development, the Office of the City Administrator, the Fire Department, the Fire Marshal, and other related parties to provide information on reforms to the Department of Housing and Community Development's permit process. Again, this bill was introduced on October 3rd, 2022, and the bill sponsor is Councilwoman Ramos. Councilwoman Ramos, comments, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, committee members, for taking the time this afternoon. This is our second hearing on this topic. Our first hearing was on March 3rd, and the purpose of this hearing is just to get an update from DHCD and the Fire Marshal as to the reforms that they are making to the building permit office. This is not the event permits. This is the building permits. And I have some specific questions that I've sent ahead of time, but I know that, and we did get a short briefing at one of our council lunches that I think created more questions there as well. So this is an opportunity for DHCD, and also we've invited the Fire Marshal back as well to go over what those reforms that they are planning on doing are, and the timeline for doing so. I don't think I have to outline some of the concerns that I know my other colleagues also have, but just some concerns that have come up in the last few months include inspectors not showing up for appointments or showing up when, obviously the resident has to take off work and may show up at a different time. We did have an issue with language barrier in the office, which I appreciate Mr. Davis has been helping me with. That there's been a disconnect between what residents have been told, what contractors are told, and trying to reconcile that issue. I do have a question about the navigator for helping people who, inadvertently bought a house that has a VBN on it, even though that they thought it was perfectly rehabbed. That is not directly relevant here, but it is, I think, part of the question because it does come from it would be navigating through the permit office. Making sure that a situation that happened in my district where plans were approved at one point and then the inspection failed because the plan shouldn't have been approved in the first place. And then, of course, the fire marshal's plans for timely inspections and reviews of plans so that our business community can get off the ground as well. So those are just a few things that I've highlighted for them. I'm sure that my colleagues have, for the department and for the fire marshal, I'm sure that my colleagues have other questions as well. And this is a really big issue because I'm very optimistic that we will be rehabbing properties in a pretty quick pace here, and I want to just make sure that our permit office is efficient and effective. We obviously want to have safe housing, so we don't want people skirting around the issue, but want to make sure that they have people have a permit office that they can trust. So I appreciate DHCD spending a lot of time on thinking through those reforms, and I look forward to hearing more about the reforms, the timeline, and the next steps. So thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, colleagues, and thank you to DHCD and the Fire Marshal's Office as well.
Thank you. And now we'll go through agency reports, and we'll save housing for last. Get through city solicitor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jeff Hochstetler again with the Solicitor's Office. We approve the resolution itself for form and legal sufficiency.
Thank you. City Administrator.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Dominic McAlilly on behalf of the Mayor's Office of Government Relations. The City Administrator's Office stands by their report.
And the fire department or fire marshal? Fire department first.
Okay. The Dominic McAlilly again from the Mayor's Office of Government Relations. The fire department stands by their report for this resolution.
Thank you. And the fire marshal. Just say who you are and if you. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I am Deputy Chief Ames from the Office of the Fire Marshal.
And you approve this report?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
I approve the report. Thank you.
Appreciate that. And Housing and Community Development, you're on.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the council and the committee. Alice Kennedy, Housing Commissioner, representing Department of Housing and Community Development. With me today is Deputy Commissioner Jason Hessler, who oversees permit and litigation, as well as Stephanie Murdoch, our Director of Legislative and Constituent Affairs, and also Chief of Staff Scott Davis is with us as well. Is Val here? Oh, and Val's hiding in the back. With us, we also have
Val. You can come on up.
I totally miss Val.
You can sit
and
up
also
at
with
the
us
desk.
is Valentina Ucuomo, who is a special advisor in the Commissioner's Office and has been a key staff member in terms of spearheading a lot of the work that we've been doing in terms of the permits, software, and overhaul of the system. So, are we gonna?
So we have a PowerPoint presentation that we're going to share here.
Okay. As they're getting the PowerPoint together. I know the sponsor had listed several questions that I'm sure will probably be answered through your your presentation.
We can also just talk through it if. That's okay. We can, we'll just talk through it, and then we can always provide the actual presentation as a follow-up to the hearing. Okay.
I'm sorry, I think it's the online system that they're having problems with, but
Okay.
I'm going to pass my computer over to you, and then...
I have it.
okay.
I'm good. And then we'll get it emailed out. So overall, we just wanted to kind of remind everybody out of the gate that, you know, permitting services in terms of plans review, permit processing, inspection, zoning, et cetera, supports the safety of the residents, and is also, we recognize it as an economic engine for the city, ensuring that work is done in a timely manner, and also supports not just housing rehabilitation, new construction of projects, and also businesses as well. The e-permits and e-plan system is the process which those services are typically performed. And just an overview that in fiscal year 23, DHCD issued 40,615 permits in fiscal year 2023. One of the key components to this in terms of why we have to, why we started to look at needing to kind of review where we were with permits and permitting system is that the current system is about 15 years old. It requires constant updates, and I often describe it as that we are gently holding a very delicate piece that if we slightly drop it, it could explode and cause some serious problems for us all. So we are massaging and gently maintaining that through constant updates. Our team works very closely with BSIT on this. BSIT has been a true partner in helping us to kind of work through some of these pieces to that and make sure that the updates that we can do and kind of meet the demands of where we are currently. So one of the key driving factors is the system itself, which is old, built on old types of software platforms and not easily updated. And the code is very unique, and it is a challenge for even some of the top coders to try to figure out. So that was a big piece. We know that overall, both for staff and for the public, it is sometimes labor intensive. It can cause some glitches in terms of usability and not being user friendly, and we knew that we needed to kind of move through. And as we work to reduce the number of vacant properties in the city of Baltimore, we know that having something that can be easily utilized by everybody. We have a lot of, I know that many of our developers actually don't have any problems with the system itself. They are able to make the applications, go in, get the permits, schedule it, and it works like clockwork. And then we have some that are either new or emerging that typically might have some issues and try to kind of move through this. So the main goals that we've always wanted to do is improve our customer service and relations through a user-friendly application process, live application status updates so you can very clearly have an understanding of where your application and permit application is. Also being able to auto-generate some permits that is on the list of looking things, and also additional web-based services for scheduling inspections to kind of add an additional ability for scheduling those inspections. We also have goals of reducing the data entry time to 15 minutes per transaction with the new system, reducing the permit review and approval cycle because of the integrated workflow. So part of the big piece of all of this work actually goes back over 2 years now, which was evaluating all of the workflows around permits within the agency and kind of where those flow and how we can ensure that we have integrated workflows for the work and the staff, and reduce staff time. So the big piece of this is not just the customer-facing side, but the internal-facing side for the staff, so that there's a system that can work, that works not just for the public and is easier to navigate, but also easier to navigate and utilize from the staff piece. One other piece of this is when we started to kind of go into this as a reminder, this isn't just about the permit system itself and kind of looking at the office and the system. but we could not update the permit system without doing our code enforcement system at the same time because they're integrally connected and need to be able to have that ability. So this includes an update to CHIP, which will manage all of our housing inspections, our notices, our citations, our 311 generated requests and work orders and other items as well. So we're doing both systems at the same time to kind of move this through, which was part of the workflow analysis and other pieces to kind of planning that came out. And this will just continue to also create some transparency for us. It also is going to digitize the BMZA process with us and just overall kind of improved. So where we are today, I know that when we had our last hearing and in our bill report for the last hearing, we had predicted that we would be further along than we are now based on the information that we had at that time. So at that time, we thought that we would actually, in our bill report, I believe it says that we would be shooting to kind of launch in a February of 2024 timeframe. Right now, where we are based on what we learned, over the end of the spring, kind of into the summer, and with vendor selection and finalizing this work, is that we're actually going to be kind of in the launch phase in December of 2024. So instead of February 2024, we're looking at December of 2024. So we officially executed all the appropriate ARPA agreements. There's a significant portion of this which is funded through ARPA, $3 million worth. And we also went through the vendor interview and selection process and contract negotiation in partnership with BSIT on this. The vendor that is helping us on the system is Excella, and they are widely known to be able to handle this work and not just kind of permits, but also on the code enforcement side. The total cost, I mean, this went through just for your awareness. It is the software construction as well as a six-year subscription component. Total cost is $5,685,007.31. And the project construction timeline overall is 9 to 14 months. So we've already started. We've basically set up the meeting with Excella, I think the Friday after the Board of Estimates meeting that approved the contract. We had the initial kickoff with Excella on this and have already started to kind of work through the development of the software and working through those pieces. System launch is estimated to be December of 2024. And a key component to this in terms of why is it taking that long is that this is a large project encompassing 2 different systems that also have a significant amount, not just of building out the workflows, incorporating those that we have with our other agency partners, but also there's going to be a large data migration component to this and a very intensive training component, not just for staff, but there's going to be a very intensive outreach, education, and training component for the users in the general public. So we're going to have not just kind of once it's ready, training sessions, but we also maintain focus groups. That's one of the items that Val leads on our team are several different focus groups working with those that utilize the permit system. So a lot of the work that went into kind of working through the scope of work and some of the pieces in workflow are because of the outreach and information sessions that we've had with contractors, developers, small, large, medium, all different sizes, also just some general humans that if I were to apply for a permit as an owner of a property to also make sure that this works. And so there are also going to be periods of time built into this timeline for testing before we even get to the point where there's a large kind of launch and then general education pieces to this. So that's where we are right now in terms of the timeline and how this will flow out. They're actively working on putting things together, working through the workflows, developing the software components, and moving forward. And then we hope to then be in terms of somewhere of that testing time frame would be like early fall of 2024, August to October of 2024 for some of the testing pieces, even before that, and then education components built in there. So that's where we are right now on that. We also I'll talk about just a couple of items that were mentioned in the sponsor's opening remarks. We have advertised for the position that would help not just with the kind of solving the vacant building notice issue where someone's living in the home, but they realize that they have a vacant building notice because the contractor or developer didn't get the final use and occupancy permit, and kind of also that liaison position to help move people through different parts of the process. We did have that advertised. We got candidates, we did some interviews, didn't find the right candidate. So if you know of anybody that would be interested, that position I think is in the act of being reposted or will be reposted, but they just kind of finished. But it was out for a number of months, and we just haven't found the right staff person. But as it relates to, especially on the VBN side, we have staff people that are assisting now if someone does have a VBN and needs to move to get that and get their use and occupancy permit. And we're also finalizing some rules around this, which will also help it easier just in terms of process. So I wanted to kind of mention those items, and then happy to answer other questions.
Thank you. Thank you for that. This is a huge undertaking. The one thing that pops in my mind, I know that BG&E, Verizon, Comcast, they do a lot of work in our city, in homes and so on. Do they play a role in knowing this process?
Well, a lot of the work that they do would not involve permits. When you get into like Constellation's Home, I guess it used to be called BGE Home, that work would require permits, and they're familiar with that process. The same as most plumbers and electricians are familiar with the process and have staff that apply for permits where appropriate. And that's usually installation of water, hot water tanks, and that kind of, gas stove and that kind of work. And a lot of those permits are issued the same day. They don't take a lot of review because it doesn't go to a lot of agencies.
So, and I know in-house Public Works and Transportation kind of also, would that interfere with any of that? I'm just thinking offhand, I know the Roland Park area is getting ready to have a massive transportation, and BG&E dig up, and it's going to affect properties and so on.
Yeah, our process doesn't impact what Public Works is doing. They're exempt from the building fire and related codes for work that is in the right of way.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that was said publicly. Any other questions from committee members? We'll start with Councilman Stokes and work our way down.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, thank you for that presentation. My question is, the last time we had a hearing, we talked about permits and how many you get every month, and y'all were actually hiring more people. I think you was getting building permits like 4,000 a month. And my question was, well, how many more employees you gonna hire in terms of addressing those permits? Can you tell me how many people you hired and how many more you need? And the reason why I'm asking that is because, and how many employees are working from home? That's another question. So it's like a two-part question.
Good question, yes.
Yep. Happy to answer that. So we can start off, first of all, giving an overview of some of the positions. So typically, we're looking at a fully staffed around 70 staff members with it that cover the permits, plans, building, mechanical, electrical, zoning, et cetera. And right now, we have 17 open positions. We actually have hired recently, we have 4, think we ended up hiring 4 permit techs, 2 of which.
We made 4 offers. We brought on 3 people. Actually, interviews are happening today for 2 of those positions. And just in the permits office. So we're going from 8 permit techs to 10 permit techs, and we're also adding in a office support specialist to assist with phones and paperwork and that kind of stuff, which that position didn't exist previously, and that person was just offered the position. Those interviews occurred and offer is out, so they should start soon.
And 2 of those positions are newly available positions to fill that were approved in, for this fiscal year's budget.
My follow-up to that is, you say you have 17 positions open. Is there a timeline, or are you still interviewing people for those 17 positions?
Yeah, it's 17 positions across 6 offices, so it's an ongoing process. Like one of those permit tech positions is an employee that moved over to the fire department. But I'm not holding a grudge because it'll probably in the long run help all of us. So that was a position that wasn't empty last month and is empty today, but luckily we had that position already advertised, so we should be able to fill it very quickly, knock on wood. So it's an ongoing process. We actually did a job fair earlier this month. I'm trying, my timing, earlier this month, where we held on-the-spot interviews for some positions, got some good candidates that came through that weren't already in the pipeline and were able to hire. So we're getting creative, and we've had some help with that from DHR in adjusting the normal hiring rules to be able to do those interviews in person same day as somebody walked in. So that was very useful, very creative.
And Madam Chair, can it be a request, the information you just shared, can the committee get a copy of that?
We can actually provide that. And also I wanted to just mention, you brought up a question, your second question was about in-person staff and so forth. So overall, the majority of the permit staff is in person. The permit office itself closed from March of 2020 until August of 2021. But other than that, the permit staff is in office. During that time, the majority of all the permits were processed online, and you could drop off documents if any documents were needed during that time frame. We're actively working with the mayor's office in terms of the hybrid remote to work. But this permit staff itself and so forth have been in the office. They're not staff members. The building inspectors are typically coming in, making phone calls, potentially in the morning before they go out. They go out, and then they might go back to do some of their final paperwork, either in the office or approved to do final paperwork at home. But everybody's basically in the office.
Madam Chair, real quick, can you actually give us a copy of what that process looked like? And the only reason why I say that, I know I'm glad you talked about training, because my own personal experience, I can call over housing and have one question, and I get 6 different answers. And that's very unfortunate. That's why I'm glad you said something about training. And it becomes confusing because developers call us, and one person tell them they only need this, and then after they did it, no, you need these other 3, and it's very confusing. So is there a process? I guess it depends on what type of permit it is. Is there a process you can provide to show us what those steps are and what is required?
We do have a number of tutorials and information available online, which is actually one of the things that we discovered during the surveying that we did, which was that developers, contractors did not take advantage of the PDFs available, the video tutorials available on how to and what documents would be needed for different permits. So we do have that available online. We can continue to make reference to that. It will change. So what is available online is what is available to describe what is needed for the specific permits needed right now. That will change as we work through the new system, just to make sure everybody can get there. But we can make sure that also staff is retrained. We do retraining with staff. That's something that Deputy Hessler and the team has done often, was just to make sure that retraining is happening. Sometimes with new staff coming on board, there are little hiccups that occur, but we aim to strive to correct those as we find out about them as well.
Could you send us that online information, and that way we can disseminate it as well to calls that we get?
And just also a point of clarity too, while the office was closed to the public during the pandemic, we had staff in the permits office every day during the pandemic. So it was closed to the public, but our staff was also in the office.
And that's regular business hours? Gotcha. Councilman Conway.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for the presentation. I know we've been working on permits for a while, and certainly I think upgrading the system is going to be really helpful toward getting where we want to be. I'm curious if we have at our fingertips or can pull together an estimate of how long it takes for certain permits to get through the system and get approved. Do we have that information? Can we tell by permit type how long it takes to get something approved?
Yeah, permit type is difficult because there really aren't a lot of different types of permits that break it down. You know, a permit for a water heater versus the permit for a full rehabilitation of a property looks the same. They're both combination permits when they're applied for. So the majority of permits do get issued within 24 to 48 hours of submission, where like demo permits take much longer because they involve sometimes as many as 8 different city agencies to sign off, and involves paying up taxes, paying up water bills, getting sediment erosion control. You know, so depending on the type of permit, things can take much longer. And then you have permits that have plans attached. We process around 3,300 permits that have plans with them, and those are anything from a small house remodel to an entire complex or a high rise, and involve a lot of review. We do provide guaranteed review times on those types of permits and plans, and track that and try to stay within those guidelines. The new system will have a lot better reporting options, some that come built in, but also the availability of, after training, that we could build reports that we need as the need arises. It's just a lot more flexible. We don't have to turn to a programmer to design a report on permitting for us.
I would also just add as a reminder, the way that the process and workflow, it still is that DHCD is a hub, and there are spokes, and it has to go out to those spokes for those reviews, et cetera. So some of the permit reviews, depending upon the agency, the other agency and our partner agencies take varying lengths of time as well in terms of when it comes back. So sometimes we've been waiting on a permit, DHCD isn't moving it, and we look, and it's unfortunately sitting in a review with another agency. So just to follow up on that, the reporting, and it'll also have a better understanding in terms of understanding where you are in the process with the new system too.
Yeah, I asked that question, and there's a second part to that question, specifically around inspections to get the UNO, use and occupancy. Because I've had a couple of examples of folks who've come to me that have had difficulties and for any number of reasons. And I think we all know this, although we may forget it, that we want people to invest in Baltimore's properties. We want people to fix up their homes, and we want them to get permits to do it, not only because that ensures that they do it correctly, but then it also makes sure that we can account for that improvement on that property and improve the tax value so that we bring in more money. So it's really, 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 really important that we make it super easy for people to follow the process. I think it's no shock to everybody in this room. There's a ton of unpermitted work happening. And from my experience and when I've talked to folks doing work on homes around the city and various contractors, they say it's really, really frustrating to work with the city because any number of reasons. I think the investment in e-permits is going to help a lot. But I think there's still more that we need to do to figure out the coordination between various agencies. And I want to be thoughtful about, we want to be able to say, yes, for certain, we're turning around a permit within 24 hours, and we're turning around an inspection within 24 to 48 hours, or whatever it is we want to guarantee, so that nobody can come back to us and say, it's really hard to get a permit in Baltimore, because it hurts us two times. One, because we don't get the assessment, and two, because we don't get the investment. So I don't know if we have that data available. I would love to see it. It just kind of helps me wrap my head around where we are and if there is an opportunity to improve. Because in an ideal world, instead of having 70 folks in your office, we'd have 140 because we just got that much development going on, that much investment happening across the city.
I'm going to address a couple of those, and I'm going to ask Deputy Hessler to address a couple. One, also within the new system and so forth, it necessarily isn't needing to double the amount of staff to do the work. So that's one thing. It isn't that we want to see the investment and then we'll need a significant amount of more staff to be able to process. That's one of the key components of actually the system and the electronic kind of software system and solutions that we have available to us through that won't necessarily equate to needing a significant number of staff as we see an increase in permits. I mean, as I stated, we processed and issued 40,650 in 1 year. That is not a number to, balk at, and a majority of those were definitely done, I would say, as Deputy Hessler said, 24 to 48 hours. I would even say if we were to look at the next step, we were looking at like 96 hours for a permit to be issued. And I did want to address kind of the comment on people are like, oh, it's just too hard to do it. That goes to some of the things that we talked about in terms of education and outreach on it, because the information is there. I've met with plenty of contractors and developers that they say in a room full of their peers at different events where it's not the system, you don't know how to use it, and they call out their colleagues on it. I will share with you that that's something that we do have to do a better job of in terms of educating the contractors that exist on what is required. I'll share a slight anecdote story. I went to install something in my house, and I was getting estimates, and I was finalizing between two different companies, and I just said, so can you tell me how, is there a delay? When can you get the parts? And how fast can you pull, when can you get the permit and when can you get the parts? One person said it to me on text, one person said it to me over the phone. Two different contractors both said, oh, we don't need a permit for this in Baltimore. And the one person on the phone, I said, I let there be a break, and I said, actually, you do need a permit to do this. And then they said, well, if we have to pull the permit, it'll be an additional $600 for us to pull the permit. And I was like, oh, this is not their day. And I was like, well, you do need to pull a permit, and I'm not paying you an additional $600 to pull a permit because that's not how much the permit costs. Right. And I know that you can get this permit easily online, and it's required because I am the housing commissioner of the city of Baltimore and technically the building code official. If I only had the ability to see their face in person with a jaw drop, but I heard it in silence over the phone, I immediately sent them to the tutorials, to what they needed to do, and walked them through how to pull the permit, and they said, oh, We just didn't know, or I'm like, it's all online. They're like, well, we have to go to the office. And I'm like, you don't have to go to the office. You can do this all online and make it simple. And I will say that that's one of the areas that as an agency over the years, we haven't done a great job, I think, on our part to fully educate people on what is required, how to do it, and how easily to do it. And it is difficult sometimes because contractors pop up, a lot. So I will take that on our side for sure, which is one reason why the education, the outreach, the building into the timeline for the new system is so important to us, because it's going to build off of what we've learned is that people aren't taking advantage of the information that's there, even when we provide tutorials. We also provide online. We've done in advance. So we want to ensure that people have access to the information and can know that it actually isn't that difficult to do their part of the job, which is to pull the permit.
I appreciate that story because I've had a similar story. So I think that anecdote, it happens a lot. And I think there are probably at this point many contractors that don't even attempt to get permits and just assume that they're just going to move forward without it. I want to get to two very quick things. Do we keep track at all of abandoned permit applications? So people who initially come to us, they start the permit application and then don't follow through, and then maybe check those properties to see if they were improved?
We do keep that data. We do some checking on it, but most of our work without a permit comes in from community complaints or staff observations in the field. So that's where the majority of the work without a permit activity comes from.
And to that effect, do we at all proactively try to help people when they get stuck? So let's say they applied for a permit, things got gummed up. I can tell you, and I'm going to follow up with both of you guys at the end of this hearing about an ordeal that's been going on for 2 years now. And do we proactively follow up with folks to help them usher through the process, or is there any of that? Like, is there any of that happening? Is there that expectation from the folks on the permits office?
If I'm understanding your question correctly, so the proactive reaching out for when individuals abandon permits, I would have to say we're not really looking at that, because there's a number of reasons why permits get abandoned. People start the project and decide to change it up and then change their permits, or lose their funding. Some permits are pulled just to extend the time they have in showing that they're doing something with the property. So I don't know that weeding through all that would be an efficient use of time. The permit navigator position that we talked about earlier is that role that we're looking to bring on, not just someone that would help, as the Councilwoman mentioned, with people that buy rehabbed vacant buildings that don't get all their inspections or permits or their use, but also just new developers to the city, property owners, community groups, others that are looking to navigate through that permit process. And that would be a role where they're focused in on both educational materials that'll help kind of the masses, but also that holding of hand through the process where it's needed. Especially if it's somebody that's trying to get their development team off the ground in Baltimore in the first time, and if we can train them right on the first project, then they'll be good to go for all the rest and do the investment that you've been talking about without needing any more handholding. And we've been successful at that with others where people are starting up or have run into a barrier, and then we're able to correct them, and they don't need to come back to us with the same problems because they've learned that process. So we can do a better job of that at this time, and then also with the new system, we are looking to be more efficient and more effective. And the new system, the design, is a professional design. by people that have done this in other cities throughout the country, have a lot of practice in it, and bring on special individual people to help with the way the screen looks to the user, the colors used, where the buttons are placed, what language is used, what should be required, what shouldn't be required fields, being able to plug in and say, before you go to the next step, you're going to need these 3 things in front of you. That kind of stuff, which a programmer may or may not be their, cup of tea, their specialty. The current system we have was designed by a programmer, and it didn't have all that involved, and it was cutting edge when it came out, and it still does some things that these off-the-shelf products aren't going to provide. But I think that from an efficient, effective, customer-oriented, this is the way to go, and you're going to see a lot of change come when we launch it.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do want to defer to Councilman Bullock since he's on the committee. I do have 2 questions, but if you want to jump ahead of me. Good.
He yields to you.
Much appreciated. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner, and your team and Chief. I appreciate the story. I do want to push back, though, a little bit on the premise, which is I still hear from many developers and contractors who are very familiar with our systems that they are having significant challenges getting permits on time. And so while there may be a number of folks who are struggling to use the systems, I will not deny that that is true. I still think there are there are many who are expert at navigating Baltimore's permitting process and still report that they can't get a call back, they can't get an email back, the plans reviewers are non-responsive. And so, first I do want to thank Jason Hessler, who is always on call and is very responsive, Chief Eames as well. But I do think we have a real problem here, and I think to my colleagues' premise, Councilman Stokes and Councilman Conway, I think it goes a little beyond just the software issue, and I do think it's about capacity and us being honest that whether it's we just don't have enough people in the fire marshal's office, in DHCD, and so I think we got to solve that problem and figure out, is this about we're not paying people enough? Is this about it's better working conditions in Baltimore County, so we're losing folks there? I just think I am glad that we're getting the new software. I'm sorry it's been delayed. I think it will improve efficiencies internally, but I think to Councilman Stokes' premise, I do think there are capacity issues of just not having enough staff, and then not having staff that are there or well-trained or able to respond effectively, because I'm not just hearing it from unscrupulous contractors that don't know what they're doing. I'm hearing it from folks who, and Jason knows many of these folks, who work with the city every single day and are good developers, good contractors, and they're still having the same problem. So I guess I would love to hear your response, and maybe Chief Eames as well, just around the capacity concerns, because to me that is honestly what is driving more of our problems, and I wish it were more front and center in this conversation.
I think that it's a yes and answer to that, which based on where we are right now in terms of also internal capacity with the issues that we have internally with the staff, with the system, that does cause a significant amount of issues. Even where we enter something what we thought we've put in the message board and it's not showing up anywhere. That's a glitch that staff has kind of taken through. A majority of components with staff too is the amount of time that the staff is kind of on the phone walking people through how to do the applications and some different pieces there, which we also know will free up with the new system. So I think that yes, there are issues. We're not trying to say that there aren't issues, because there are, which is one reason why we're changing it. We also know that some of the capacity components on our end will actually, the new system will help address some of those capacity components with the staff. And we've already taken steps to fill and get positions that we didn't have last fiscal year to fill in capacity where we need some of the additional capacity to be. I would defer also to Deputy Hessler on some of the questions too around training, answering phone calls, getting calls back, and we've been putting some effort into making changes around that.
Could I just ask before you do that, I guess from your vantage, Commissioner, like how much of that is about salary and compensation and that we need to just bump the salary for folks versus, you know, whatever the other issues are? Like it just seems like we don't have enough people, and sometimes the people that we do have are struggling. And so that seems solvable. Granted, there are many constraints on our budget and so on and so forth, but I guess like how much of this is just we're not paying people enough to be able to attract enough people to fill these jobs so that we could more expeditiously move permits?
I mean, I'd like to be able to give everybody in every agency across the city of Baltimore a raise for the amount of work that they have to do as public servants and what they have to take on. That would be amazing if we could do that for a city, and it would be amazing if we could do that for an agency. I would say, though, that just giving more money doesn't necessarily mean attracting. Also, it can attract different staff members. I don't know if Deputy Commissioner has additional information, but you know, there are key components to the work and to what the staff is doing and where they are, where I, right now, wouldn't say that. I'd have to get back to you with a full answer, because I can't say that 100% emphatically that if I were to be able to raise everybody's salary by $20,000, that would shift our capacity. We get people that transfer through the office or change just based off of regular turnaround. Like the vacancies that we have aren't necessarily having a hard time filling those vacancies. It's just that those vacancies have come through at different times as a standard kind of rolling anticipated retirement or loss of positions. So overall, I would say absolutely, if we could provide additional salaries, not just for this office within the agency, but the agency across the board, 100%, because people are doing work that deserves to be compensated for, and they've showing up and dealing with a lot of stuff on a regular basis. But I do think that part of what we have here is just normal vacancies rolling through, and we have been evaluating how to handle other pieces of capacity from phone answering, and we have been evaluating salaries and moving some things around in this division as well as others. So it's once again, it's kind of a yes and. Can I 100% say that I think that this is mainly because we need to pay people more money? No. I want to do a little bit more research on my end to see how that played out in terms of really what we're looking at with some of the turnover that we've seen. Do I think that any time we could offer more money to staff that it would help? Absolutely. And I think that the quality of work that the staff is facing and what they're doing with the system that they currently have, and some of the pressures from just clients and that face-to-face that they get, you know, they're doing a fantastic job with what they're faced with every day. And I'll defend every single one of them. I mean, we'll definitely go through and need to do any appropriate disciplinary actions if there's anything that's egregious, et cetera, but I'll defend the staff 100% for showing up to doing their job and doing it to the best of their ability every day.
Thank you. And we'll end our questioning with Councilwoman Ramos.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple of questions after the presentation as well. And I know that you had just, stated that you would defend the staff. I just don't see this as just a technology issue, however. I've still getting complaints, as my colleagues have mentioned, that there have been missed appointments, that there's, people can't get somebody on the phone when there's a question. So in your thinking through with the workflows, and I'm glad that in your planning since our last meeting, you've done that workflow analysis, so you realize that has to, come together with code enforcement, and you're going to be doing a lot of training, but are you going to be evaluating everybody to make sure that we're getting top-notch to be able to perform what needs to be done?
I mean, everybody's evaluated on a yearly basis on their job performance at every level, whether or not it's our CUB employees, our MAPS employees, et cetera. So everybody goes through that yearly evaluation, and we do discipline staff as needed. I would also say, in terms of some of the components around missed appointments and so forth, we haven't been getting as complaints on the missed appointment side. I know there have been a couple that have come through. The inspectors make phone calls every morning between 7 and 9:30 to their call sheet for the day to confirm that what time they believe they'd be there. Will the person that they're supposed to meet be there to meet them? That is something. Sometimes those are canceled if the permit inspection is done out of order, if the other person isn't ready for that inspection to happen. So there are some cancellations. We've also seen sometimes where it isn't communicated in terms of how that and where that cancellation is. I'm going to stand by saying that there is a huge amount of this that is technology-based.
There's no question about that.
And that also, the amount of time that the staff is taking right now, trying to manage what they have to manage on the staff side, enter with the technology, is a huge time suck on what they're trying to accomplish in their workday. And there will be a solution. There is going to be a component to that changes and shifts on some of the capacity pieces.
Okay.
Am I going to say that we don't need any more staff 100%, we're good at 70? No, I'm not going to say that. We've been hiring, like we said, we got additional positions this year that we've been able to fill. We filled those fairly quickly. And as we evaluate and move where the new system is going to take us, we will also have a better understanding of what positions do we actually need in the future, and how will that play out. Deputy Commissioner has also done some work on phones and so forth. I don't know if you want to mention anything around.
Around the inspections, one thing to make sure everybody's aware of is that, because we often get complaints from people that they couldn't get through to schedule their inspection. And that is always confusing and mind-boggling to me, because you don't actually ever get through to speak to somebody to schedule an inspection. 80% of all inspections are currently scheduled online, the same way that the permits are applied for from the same site. You can go on, pick your day, and you can do it if you're calling or going online before 1 o'clock. You can get a permit inspection the next day, almost always. Occasionally, mechanical inspections run 2 or 3 days, depending on illness or vacation leave. But building inspections, which are the majority of our inspections, are next day inspections and have been throughout the year. We haven't had any issues in that realm. As far as phones go, the hiring of some additional staff will help free up phones, particularly in the permits office. The Office of Support Specialist is going to be specifically dedicated to phones. We just had an Office Support Specialist fill an open position in the Inspections Division, where we had other staff sliding over and assisting and covering the one that was existing there. We've been trying out, working with the comptroller's office, having phones first go to, certain phone lines first go to the city operators, where they would answer and try to screen out, because a large volume of calls that come through aren't for our permits office. They're calling about getting on the Section 8 list, or having a Baltimore County permit, or having an inspection scheduled. And so if staff are answering that call, they're not able to get to a call where somebody actually needs Baltimore City permit assistance. So that's helped to screen out some calls. It's not a perfect system yet. It's very new. We've only been doing it for a month or 2 months maybe. So we're definitely still playing with that. But the commissioner is correct in that with a more effective, efficient, front-end, customer-oriented process, we will be cutting down on the number of calls, emails, and messages coming in. So if it's easier for somebody to apply for a permit, they won't need to contact the staff, and then the staff can focus in on the people that do need assistance, or just in actually doing the job of processing those permits faster. I agree with both Councilman Stokes and Councilman Conway that we have to pay particular attention to what's going on in the permit world, and how permits are increasing or inspections are increasing. My experience with the city is, as we make things easier, people comply better, which makes more work on the other end too. So if we get more people applying for permits, there are going to be more people calling in for inspections, and we're going to have to keep an eye on that and adjust as necessary. But we went from doing 26,000 permits a year to around over 40,000 permits a year with the same staff and the same system, and it caught up to us, and we recognize that. Having this system in place and having an outside vendor that is at least twice a year doing updates to their system, incorporating new technology, incorporating new methods, making changes, that's something that takes off the plate of the city to do, and will benefit from the learning that they have across the country with all the different jurisdictions. So I know, I'm certain in going through this with them that they're going to walk away and say, like, hey, Baltimore had some really great ideas. In our next version, we need to incorporate these things, because we've seen that in other things that we've done. Despite what some say, Baltimore City is cutting edge on code enforcement and permits and inspections. I was in Memphis last month talking to LA County, Dallas, Massachusetts on our code enforcement stuff. And in many cases, they're just jaws drop when they're like, what we can do, how our council and our mayor support us in what we're able to do. Receivership was a big topic during that time, and they were just, we wish we could do that. We wish we had the support of our legislators. How do you deal with the community? And like, we bring them in, we talk with them, we make them part of the process. So
just to follow up on that real quick, though, you and I had an email exchange about the fact that I had a constituent who waited for an inspector because they needed something that was on their roof or porch looked at, and ended up, the inspector didn't come. And the inspector then told the resident that they don't go on the roofs, they don't go on the ladders, and rely on photos. And that this particular inspector said, well, I approve everything that this contractor does. So I feel like we need to really, first of all, take a look at, what are the practices of each of our inspectors? Are they returning calls, et cetera? If they're automatically approving stuff because of a certain contractor, that's also a problem. But then there's the other issue of how can we know that the work that was done on the roof, on the HVAC that's on the roof, on the porch, is done properly just by having somebody take a photo and send it to the inspector? Because that could be anything. You know, so I get that there's liability with the ladder, but I feel like that has to be resolved because as many of my colleagues already noted, and as you've noted, you know, we're actually going to see a lot pick up because as the system's improved, then, you know, things are happening. We are confident, all of us are confident that we're going to be moving forward on addressing vacancies, so there's going to be more construction. But that means that there's going to be a lot of work being done on roofs and porches. So I'm kind of curious as to how we're going to resolve that issue.
Sure. Yep. So most roof work doesn't require permits. So that's one piece. So if you're just repairing, replacing your roof and you're not touching any of the structural elements, then you don't need a permit, and so it's not a challenge in that case. There are situations where we will take photos. If there is any question as to the authenticity of the photo, we'll have the contractor meet us on site and actually go up and do a video conference or take the photos there and send them to us. You know, we don't automatically sign off on anyone's work, and if that was relayed in that way, that's incorrect. I think you can get to a position where you can identify whose work it is when you see it, particularly when it's poor work. You know, going on to a site, depending on who's calling in an inspection, you know, what to expect and maybe what to look for, that you may not need to look for if it was somebody else calling it in, just because of the quality of work. So I think inspectors kind of get into those little habits. We do regular training with the inspectors as well as the permit and plans review staff. You know, meet with them on a weekly basis to go over any issues that come up and retrain on those issues.
Well, I'll
So I
follow
think-
up with you on that separately, because we do have public testimony that I want to make sure, I know Madam Chair wants to hear from. But also, my last question, just quickly, is Chief of Staff Davis, you and I have been working on this issue of a couple that came into the office physically to get assistance and was blatantly told, we don't speak Spanish, so we can't help you. And I know that you do have somebody on staff who does speak Spanish in the permit office, and that everybody's supposed to be trained on language line as well. So I want to first know if, A, that family got assistance, and B, is there going to be retraining to just make sure that everybody knows how to use language line?
Thank you, Councilwoman, Madam Chair, and members of the council. Scott Davis, Chief of Staff at DHCD. Upon looking into that particular incident and speaking with staff members, we did not find evidence that occurred in DHCD. In that particular case, they were working with other city agencies, and it is possible that who they had spoken with, the advocate, had mentioned another city agency as well, and so it may be possible that happened from another agency, but I spoke with all of our staff in the permits, and no one indicated that happened. As you mentioned, we do have one of our permit techs who is bilingual in Spanish and English. We do also not just permits, but every DHCD staff member has received the language line information. We've also went and I had one of my assistants print out and take to every frontline individual a printed, so it is right there. They don't have to dig through emails. And yes, we have been able to help that particular resident. Like you, I take it very seriously that we make sure that we are serving all of our residents and all of our customers here in Baltimore City that want to work, live here in the city, and that language should not be a barrier. And that's something as part of our customer service model and also as part of the requirements in the new permit system is that it does have, while it's not 100% perfect, but does have the automatic translation option into other languages, which with Google is, sometimes right on the nose and other times not. But yes, this is something that we do take very seriously. I've spoken with staff, and they know how to use the language line, and this is something that we make sure of, and that our staff are able to serve everyone who walks through the doors.
I appreciate that. I also know that there are people who are doing construction also that also are not tech savvy. So as much as we're doing this great work on the online and that it can, be able to serve people in different languages, we just have to be ready to be able to serve people in the office. And so it sounds like you're building that capacity to be able to do so. Madam Chair, I don't know if you're going to give Chief Ames time to do his report, or how do you want to handle that?
Councilman Stoke has a comment first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is and I'm glad people are rehabbing in Baltimore City, but when developers rehab in Baltimore City, isn't it required that the standard size window that was in their house before has to be put back in the same size? And the reason why I ask that, I ride through my district, we got more short windows, look like they went to Home Depot and put the rest of the windows in there, and it just changes the look of a community, a neighborhood. My question is, who is watching that? Because I know the city planners, and it's a documentation that tell them when they rehab and they have to use the same standard size windows, but they are not doing it. I see it every day. So my question is, who is watching that? Because I'm sure my colleagues probably had the same issue, but I've seen a whole lot of help happen in the 12th district, and I should not have to be the one to ride around to say, oh, this address, they shorten the windows, this address, that's not for me to do. I'll do it, but somebody in housing has to be, the inspectors, the building inspectors is the one that's responsible for that, and it's not being done. So can somebody address that for me, please?
There are samples, by the way, throughout the entire city.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Yep. Councilman, thank you for the question, and I agree with you. It frustrates and aggravates me when I see those as well. I would say, most cases, they probably are in violation, not necessarily all cases. Definitely where CHAP or an urban renewal plan comes into play, they're, need to be replaced with the same size and likeness and material for CHAP. That's not always the case throughout the city. The amount of light and ventilation and the window size is dependent within the code, and you could have a house that had very grand windows and doesn't fall into a CHAP or an urban renewal area, and therefore a smaller window could be replaced in there, and the method used to replace that isn't necessarily directly prescribed in the code, so it doesn't have to, as long as
I don't mean to cut you off, but don't the city planners know that when somebody rehabbing a property, they make it known to the developers that you cannot reduce the size of the windows? Because I'm sure they share that with them. Am I correct?
It's not, I'm going to clear, it's not 100% across the board required that you have to keep the same size window. So in instances such as a CHAP district or with an urban renewal plan and other requirements, if there is that overlay that requires you to keep the same size, the same style, wood windows versus vinyl, then yes, you have to require it. Just so it's not a 100% across the city that the windows have to be the exact same size.
Well, real quick, there's one particular property that somebody rehabbed the house. They put in a short window, and now they told them that the person that bought the property has to fix it. But the person that developed the property did it wrong, so it's unfair to the homeowner now, if it's reported, Now, they got to take all those windows out, and they got 6 windows and all of them short. 6 windows out, and it's going to be the responsibility of the homeowner. My question is, somebody has to watch that. Maybe it's not everywhere, like you said, but it's unfair to somebody to buy the property. They get reported, and Mr. Crook say, oh, you got to take all those windows out, but the person already bought it, but it passed inspection first.
We have the same issue in my urban rural plan area, yeah.
So these are conversations that you
happy
can
to have that.
probably have
Yep.
offline as we want to move.
Already had them, Madam Chair.
We want to move forward to public testimony. We have no one that has signed in person.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, Chief Ames has a couple things that he wanted to update us on,
Oh, okay.
if you don't mind.
Chief Ames, Fire Marshal,
Yes.
you're on.
Yes, good afternoon, Councilperson Middleton, Councilperson Ramos, Councilperson Stokes, and Councilperson Conway. A question was posed, so I'm going to respond to it by Councilperson Ramos. She wanted to know about our reviewers being hired and our inspectors being put out in different places throughout the city. So in order to improve the inspection delivery service, our inspectors are being relocated from our downtown office out into different areas in the city. The proposed plan is to have 2 fire inspectors located at each of the 6 battalions in the city. A battalion is a region in the city. It's a geographical region. Right now, on November 13th, we had 1 fire inspector located in 4 of the 6 battalions. We have a fire inspector located at Truck 20, which is on Eastern Avenue. That's covering the southeast portion of the city. We have another inspector located at Engine Company 4, which is 1201 East Cold Spring Lane. That inspector is going to cover the northeast part of the city. We have an inspector located at Engine Company 45, which is the 5th Battalion, 2700 Glen Avenue, which is going to cover the northwest section of the city. And we have an inspector located at Engine 35, which is on Maud Avenue in Brooklyn, which that person will be responsible for covering the southern part of the county. The plan is also to have 2 inspectors working out at Truck Company 1, which is on Hillen Street, which will cover the whole downtown part of the city. We're also looking for a suitable location to cover Battalion 3, which is the west side. So what is that going to do? That inspector will be closer to the area that they serve. They don't have to drive back to our office. So in theory, they could probably perform 1 or 2 more inspections on any given day. Soon as we get some new vehicles, we will be putting our second inspectors out to these different places, so that'll be a total of 12. We detailed 2 personnel to the office of the fire marshal in July to assist with inspections. We have no backlog on any new use and occupancies. Most of the complaints or concerns will be on the front end, the review of plans and the inspections as relates to the plans. We currently just hired a fire life safety plan reviewer. His name is Mr. Earl Gurley. He's actually being relocated from another part of the country. He should start sometime in January. We wanted him to begin earlier, but we weren't able to get him. And to Councilperson Cohen's point, since he's not here, our primary issue with getting a plan reviewer was the money. We were trying to hire somebody between $50,000 and $70,000. That position is a $70,000 and up position. We finally got it reallocated, and now we be able to pay in the right frame. So this person will be making, I believe, $85,000, which is right in the ballpark. So to Councilperson Conway's point, we probably do need to put another, or Cohen's point, we need to put another position to take care of the influx. This person will definitely help, but we definitely need to have another person in that. So in order to do that in the interim, I'm currently training a fire inspector in-house, but that could take a long period of time to get that person up to. So we're trying to, take actions on it, but in short, we need to have another plans examiner to basically to have that. So was a couple questions about phone calls and 311. We have no issues with our phone. We have a permit technician 2, which Mr. Hester mentioned. We have a permit technician 1. So we have no issues with answering our phones and getting all our inspections set up. To date, we performed 10,300 inspections. 1,500 plan reviews have been done thus far this year, and that's only with 4 people.
Wow.
So you can see how much that group of people are working. And fire protection systems test, that's the fire alarms and things of that nature, 1,603. So we are moving forward and trying to address some of the issues. And as soon as we get Mr. Gurley, our plan examiner on board, I think you'll see a change. I think that one person will be a change. If we get a second person, that'll be great. Yeah.
Thank you for that update.
Madam Chair, real quick, I just want to mention something.
We're not.
Real quick, I just want to make a comment. Then I'm gonna.
I just want to announce, I think we're off of
Okay.
public TV.
So real quick, I know from my own personal experience, Mr. Eames and his staff has been very responsive. But I also know, and this is true, because it's two sides of this, that a lot of the persons that had to do their fire inspection did not have their paperwork correct either. So I just want to share that.
That's for sure. We had that issue as well, so I appreciate your help with that.
So we don't have any in-person testimony. We're checking now online. So please raise your hand if you want to testify. And then if there's any callers, please hear the beep. And we have no one that has responded. Okay, we have no online people or callers. So at this point, this is just, it's a lot of information because it is a permit reform. And we're going to basically recess, and the committee decided to, at a later date, to come up and meet again for a finalized update. I saw in your PowerPoint you are doing a launch December of 2024, it had? So we'll probably, sometime in the first of the year, meet again for another update. And at this point, we are now in recess.